again, I can tell you, I've talked to hundreds of doctors who, have an overconfidence in perhaps based in ignorance that, well, if I just say the right thing, they're going to do right by me. And that trust is misplaced. Medicine is a business, and doctors must advocate for themselves.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget that CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMify in the show notes to learn how. Well, we're going to depart just a bit from our usual format today. Today's guest is not a physician, but he has focused his professional life on advocating for physicians in a very, very important way. So let's hear my conversation with Mr. Ethen Nkana. I'm really excited to have quite a different type of guest than we usually have on Prescriptions for Success today. Looking forward to talking to Mr. Ethen Nkana. Ethen, how are you doing today?
Randy, I am doing fantastic. It's a Monday here in the Mile High City, and I'm living my best life today.
That sounds like a good place to be. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with Western terminology, that Mile High City is, go ahead and tell us.
Denver, Colorado.
There you go, right at the top. How's the weather out there today, by the way?
It is chilly. We are finally getting the first whispers of fall and winter.
Yeah, I bet it is. My wife and I were actually out in Yellowstone about 2 weeks ago, and it was starting to get pretty nippy. Well, Ethen, let's talk about you. As you know, on our program, we want to talk about the entire arc of your career, and let's just start at the very beginning. Are you a Colorado native, or did you grow up someplace else?
I grew up kind of all over the country, Randy. I was born and raised in Illinois. My mom is a physician. My dad at the time he was an entrepreneur, but now he's a professor at the college level. But, we moved around even, when I was going into high school as a 13-year-old, we moved to Puerto Rico. So
wow.
I lived there for 4 years. Then we came back to the States. So I've lived on both coasts, and it feels like everywhere in between.
That's quite an education right there, I would think, wouldn't you say?
It was invaluable for me.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't know kind of what to expect going to what I thought was a foreign country. Yeah. And what I learned was there are people just like us with similar goals, values. And I got to learn a completely new culture, learn a new language. So it was invaluable learning experience.
I bet it was. I hear that a lot from people who move around a lot, the military types, of course. So, well, with that in mind, as you made your plans for the career building part of your education, you went to Ohio. How did that come to be?
My mom is a physician, and she's an anesthesiologist by training. And when I was in high school, going into college, she told me, Ethen, get a job in medicine. You'll always have a job. And so my career trajectory, because I didn't become a physician, I wanted to stay close to medicine, like my mom said. And so my career pathway or goal was to become a hospital CEO. And
Wow.
Ohio, yeah, so where Ohio fit
One
into
of, one
that,
of the most detestable creatures on earth, if you ask a
hey,
physician. But you,
I get to sit in with them every couple of weeks for negotiations, so I'm not talking bad about
I
them.
understand. I get it.
But
Okay.
I
Sorry
will
for the
tell you,
interruption.
no, all good. Yeah, I sit in with CEOs quite a bit, and sometimes it's a little bit surreal because I think, like, what if that would be me on the other side of that table in some alternate universe or timeline? Where Ohio fit in, Randy, was me formalizing my education. So I went to undergraduate. I did an undergrad in public relations as well as business administration. And my belief was to be a hospital CEO, I probably need a certain skill set. And I felt as though the skill set of a lawyer would be a good fit for a hospital CEO, understanding the
Hmm.
laws, employment, things like that. And so I went to University of Dayton for law school, and during my second year, I began my MBA as well. So I left the University of Dayton over 10 years ago now with a Juris Doctorate and an MBA.
Wow. So, what about that? Those first few steps into the business world when you got there? First of all, what were you doing, and did you indeed feel like you were properly prepared?
I started my career as a human resources intern in a hospital making $12 an hour in Los Angeles, California.
Holy
So
cow!
to say those beginnings were meager is probably an understatement. But that really was what introduced me to the business of medicine, understanding how medical professionals, physicians are paid, how they're employed, understanding the revenue that they generate. And the cool thing about the work that I get to do that I think differentiates me from anyone else in the country is that I didn't come from a traditional legal background. I came from the front lines of working in hospitals. So when a doctor is sitting across from their CEO or the executive, that was me. So I saw what executives would say to doctors to beat them in negotiations. I saw the data that executives would use to evaluate doctors' performance or their
Hmm.
economic value. So now I get to use all of those things I learned advocating for hospitals for the benefit of physicians in contract negotiations.
I'm probably not going to quote this exactly correctly, but I seem to recall in looking over your preparatory material that the current position that you operate in now, which is your own business as I understand it, but it sounds like there might have been some significant pressure, if not a crisis, that led to that transformation. Is there a story there?
Yeah, it really was the lowest point in my career, if I'm being completely candid.
Hmm.
I was working in a hospital system where I'd been for 6 years, progressively growing leadership experience. And out of the blue, on a Friday afternoon, I got called into HR and they let me know that my department was being closed. And effectively, that left me out of a job and unemployed for the first time in my career. I recognize now, 5 years later, how common it is for people to get laid off, but that was completely new to me. It was completely foreign to me. And to put it directly, it was devastating
I'm
on a
sure it
personal
was.
level.
Yeah.
And not just the obvious things, right? Which, how do I pay my bills? I need to find another job. But I think on a very personal level, Randy, I had my identity wrapped up in my job. And so when I lost my job, I feel like I lost a sense of who am I without
Right.
that job, without that salary. So it was completely disorienting professionally and frankly personally, where the woman that I was dating at the time, who's now my wife, we were just moving in together and our relationship was growing, and then this devastating experience kind of knocked me off balance, personally and in my relationship. And I'm really fortunate that she's stuck with me through all of that and now gets to see, where we are now. But at the time, I didn't have any clue that I'd be doing today what I am now.
Are you a doctor struggling to provide the best care for your patients while dealing with financial and caregiving matters out of the scope of your practice? Do you find yourself scrambling to keep up with the latest resources and wish there was an easier way? Then this virtual caregiver conference resource will save you time, money, and sanity by giving you all the resources and information your patients need in one place. This conference helps you and your patients enlist the best strategies around healthcare resources and the best financial steps for your patients while navigating caregiving situations. You don't have to go home feeling frustrated and helpless because you couldn't connect your patients with the best services. Find out more at jeanniedoherty.com or click in the link in the show's notes. You don't want to miss this caregiver resource.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but first, I'd like to share a message from Navigate. After spending years in the financial sector, Navigate has met lots of clients with all kinds of student loan issues. They were confused, they were overwhelmed by the doublespeak and the overly complex forms, and especially the deliberately misleading statements from loan servicer representatives. Navigate recognized the chaos in the student loan industry and immediately brought clarity and real solutions. If you'd like to flip the script on student debt, visit www.flipthescript.loan/MD-coaches to schedule a call with Navigate. They'll tailor a plan specifically for your unique situation and work with you until the loan is paid off. What do you have to lose besides the stress of student loan debt?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests. Whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics, Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. It sounds like this layoff came about without any inkling of a warning anywhere. Is that right? Were there any warning signs that you might have seen coming if you looking at it retrospectively? What do you think?
I've thought about that quite a bit, and I think I beat myself up a little bit around the idea of what should I have seen coming before that happened. looking back, I didn't see any warning signs, Randy. But I bet you if I would have a discerning eye or a critical eye, I probably could have read the tea leaves a little bit and seen, well, where does this department fit into the larger strategy? Well, how do we contribute economically to the organization? I probably could have been a little more critical about the value that my department was bringing. But to put it directly, I had no idea that I was going to be laid off or that the department was at risk of being closed. I just didn't see that. I was blindsided.
Yeah, there has, and by the way, I want you to know that I have suffered the indignity of being fired myself.
Mm.
And I would really like to hear you talk a little bit about, because I think there's some personal coaching wisdom to be gained from these kinds of stories. But tell me a little bit about that feeling of, why didn't I see that coming? Can you enlarge on that a little bit? And I'm not asking you to look too hard and see if maybe there was a tiny clue out there somewhere, but it's that feeling that clearly you are dispensable, whereas seconds before you felt like you carried some value. That sudden transition is really rather disturbing, wouldn't you say?
I would completely agree with that characterization, Randy. And I think the other thing that weighs on me in terms of feeling as, just so lost after that time was I felt like having a W-2 job was the safe route. I always had illusions of being an entrepreneur and running my own business, but I thought that's just so uncertain. That's so unstable. There's no way, I could run my own business and sustain my livelihood for any meaningful amount of time. And so I'll go the safe route and make a really good living as a CEO. And what I didn't realize was there is no safe route. There's no route that is guaranteed to take you to any particular destination, despite how people we admire make it look so easy. There's no safe route. And when I started my business, it was really battling some internal demons of, who do you think you are to try to start a business after getting laid off? And one thing you just said, which was so incredibly valuable to me during that time, was I talked about it. I talked about getting laid off. And what I heard was a version of what you just shared, which is, hey, that happened to me too. That indignity, I really like that word, that indignity, I suffered that as well. And through that experience, I challenged myself to be vulnerable and tell people what happened. And the overwhelming response I received was, that happened to me too, and it sucks.
Yeah. I think you would also probably agree that it was a really profound moment of self-examination for you. And I'm betting that right now you feel that you know yourself better than you did prior to that event.
I think in retrospect, I had to lose my job to get to where I am today. And the reason for that is because despite my feelings about my job, some days I didn't feel like I was being utilized enough. Some days I felt as though I was climbing a ladder I didn't know I wanted to be on. But if you would have left me to my own devices, I would probably still be in that job plugging away, trying to solve the problems that I was told were important to the organization. I never would have taken the leap of faith, frankly. I would never have taken that on my own if that decision wouldn't have been made for me. So now, 5 years down the road, I can say that had to happen. But in the moment, it was legitimately my worst professional fear.
Sure. And looking at it retrospectively, do you think at that time in your life when you had that comfortable position and the reliable paycheck, do you think that had the effect of allowing you to, if not devalue yourself, at least overlook a significant degree of your value?
Absolutely. You tie, and I'll speak for myself. I tied my value to my paycheck. I tied
Hmm.
my value to my title. And and I think that's a big part of why when I lost my job, I felt rudderless. I felt
Hmm.
direction because I didn't know who I was without this professional pursuit or without these professional attributes of this is your title, this is how much you make, this is the size of your team. Those were the things that gave me an identity. And earlier you mentioned that self-reflection. That self-reflection was so important, but also incredibly scary because I had to rediscover who I am and who I was at the time without those external
Hmm.
attributes of a job, a title, a paycheck. Well, who else are you without those things? And to your listeners who are much more involved emotionally than I am, it's probably an easy answer, right? You're a son, you're a father, you're a brother, you're a volunteer, you're a mentor, a coach. You can be so many other things, but all I could see was this is my title, this is my salary, and this is my identity, all the while clamoring for the next rung on the ladder
Yeah.
to get to the next achievement, air quotes, achievement or accomplishment.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you turned the lemons into lemonade. It sounds like you've done a pretty good job of
I can say that now in hindsight, but if you and I were having this conversation 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I would
it.
I would not be as confident as I am
Of
now that
course.
this
Yeah.
all had to happen. But really, the first thing that happened after I got laid off is at the time she was my girlfriend. Again, now she's my wife. She had gotten me a massage, and I was sitting in the lobby waiting to go back. And, she wanted me to decompress and just not be stressed. And as I was sitting in the lobby, I saw this magazine, which I have it just over my shoulder on my wall, framed now. And the front of the magazine says Denver's top doctors. And I remember in that moment vividly thinking, I wonder if those doctors know how much money they should be paid. I wonder if they're paid fairly. How do they know how much they should be paid? And that thought process in the moment evolved into why don't doctors have agents like professional athletes? They follow a
Wow.
similar professional journey. They have similar, dedication to their craft, their training. And then when they come out, when they go pro, they make a bunch of money, but they don't have any experience, training, or education on how to advocate for their value. So in professional sports, those athletes hire agents whose job is to negotiate the best deal for the athlete. So that's exactly now what I get to do for physicians is I represent them in contract negotiations with some of my former colleagues, some of my former CEOs and,
Hmm.
and executives, but I help doctors get paid fairly for their hard work by understanding what the economic impact of their work is, while also bringing balance into the physician's professional and clinical life and making sure they have adequate support in their practice to provide the amazing care they've been trained to provide.
And I kind of have the feeling that you are absolutely a rare bird in this area. You're the first person that I can recall that I've ever had a conversation with whose sole means of support is to negotiate employment agreements for physicians. So you tell me, are you kind of one of a kind, or are there others to be found? And if so, how do you find a good one?
What a lot of doctors will do is they'll Google physician contract review. And there's companies that will come up that do, I think, a good job of telling physicians what's in their contract. But that's a little bit different from the work that I do. I tend to think about physician contract review as similar to diagnosis. It's like going to urgent care with a broken leg. They'll tell you you have a broken leg, but they can't necessarily repair that broken leg. For that, you need the orthopedic surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I come in. My job is to help repair the physician's contract so that way they're getting paid fairly. They have appropriate balance in their life and work, as well as adequate and sufficient clinical support. So my work is unique in the sense that doctors hire me exclusively to help them negotiate their deals. And I think the other unique thing that you won't find anywhere else in the country is, just like in sports and music and movies, my pay is attached to my physician's pay. So if I don't help doctors make more money, I don't get paid. My fee is a percentage of what we help doctors make. So that way they know that we're not just charging you in 6-minute increments like your local law firm. We are actually getting paid to add value to physicians' deals.
So you really do have some skin in the game.
Precisely.
How do your clients find you, and what kind of expectations do they have when they call you up?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, conversations like this and platforms like yours, RX for Success, are a monumental part of our strategy in getting the word out about physicians and the challenges they face in their contracts. So we're doing it right now. And in addition to that, we do a ton of education, residency programs, fellowship programs, physician associations. I was with the Iowa Medical Society, National Medical Association, doing education for them on how physicians can be paid fairly for their hard work. Now, here's the interesting thing that I've experienced, Randy, is so many doctors don't know or don't believe that they should be paid fairly.
Really?
Yeah, I just talked to an orthopedic surgeon last week who was a referral from a financial advisor colleague of mine. And this physician, beginning on January 1st, his salary is going to be cut in half. And the reality of it is, it doesn't matter how much the physician is making, $400, $500, $600, $1 million. If you cut your salary in half, it is going to have a profound impact on your lifestyle, your livelihood, and your ability to live the lifestyle that you've wanted.
No doubt about
and
that.
And this physician, when I talked to him and said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to work together to try to remedy this? I can help provide some strategies. Well, I'm going to try to email them again and see if that helps. And so doctors are so conditioned to wanting to solve the problem themselves, or because they're the smartest person in the room, they believe if I just say the words in the right sequence or with the right intonation, I'll get what I'm looking for. But what they often neglect is there are very well established strategies for how doctors can advocate for themselves, and they rarely do it. And so a big part of my education is helping doctors understand, if you're going to actually advocate for your value, negotiate a salary raise, avoid a pay cut, there are strategies for you to do that are not related to you sending strongly worded emails, which, again, I can tell you, I've talked to hundreds of doctors who, have an overconfidence in, but perhaps based in ignorance, that, well, if I just say the right thing, they're going to do right by me. And that trust is misplaced. Medicine is a business, and doctors must advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I was all, the question on the tip of my tongue was, do you find that a lot of physicians that go to a hospital or a healthcare system to try to find work, they kind of go with the idea that whatever they're paying is what they're going to pay, and there's nothing to negotiate about?
That happens on a weekly basis. And I have now I don't get sad anymore when that happens. It's disappointing that physicians don't believe they deserve to advocate for themselves. But at the same time, it's not for me to judge what they believe is fair for them.
Sure.
So I tend to think of it like being a personal trainer. There are many doctors who, they think, well, if I do things myself, I can get what I'm looking for, which is kind of like going to a personal trainer and saying, well, if I just work out enough, I'll be in really good shape, while ignoring your diet. And so I often say, I'm the diet. I'm the one who comes in and helps doctors. Yes, working out is awesome. You're going to have to do some communication. But in addition to that, you also must create leverage. And so much of my education is helping doctors understand leverage is different from value. Every physician has some amount of value, economic, clinical, etc. But that is separate and distinct from actually having influence or leverage in contract discussions. And so I share with doctors that if you're truly going to get what you're looking for in your contract, the schedule, the support, the pay, or to bring the analogy home, if you're going to get in the best shape of your life, it's more than just asking for it. You must also make sure that you create leverage for yourself or create influence in the discussions, which again is very similar to the idea of if you eat healthy, that's really the secret sauce to getting in better shape. Yep. And I often say to doctors, if you can get leverage, create leverage, that is the secret sauce to getting what you're actually worth in your contract.
One thing that kind of interests me is, do you have the impression from time to time that the hospital executives that are trying to hire your clients are taken by surprise? And do they feel like they're being taken advantage of? Or do you feel like they understand that by getting something that everybody feels good about, that they're probably better off? So what's the feedback from the hospital execs is what I'm trying to ask here.
I think what hospital executives appreciate about working with me when I'm representing physicians is the connection with language. I can use the language that they understand in terms of how doctors get paid, how doctors interact, the value to the hospital system, things like that, where when doctors go into contract negotiations, their language is very similar to someone who, like me, who goes into a doctor's visit, but I don't know the technical terms for the things that we're talking about. So the doctor helps translate those clinical terms into things that I, as a layperson, understand. Very similarly, I take the doctor's priorities, interests, and goals and translate that into terms the hospital system understands. So, and I think one of the cool things is, while I might be the bad guy to one hospital system in a contract discussion, I'm the good guy to the others. So right now, for instance, I'm working with a group of OBGYNs. And while their current employer or hospital is doing exactly what they should be to protect their investment, to not pay the doctors more money, I'm also going around town and talking to other potential hospital systems who might be interested in these physicians. So those hospital systems and executives are excited and welcoming to me when I say, hey, I have a group of physicians that could be a good fit for your health system. Is it worth a conversation? So now those hospitals and executives are excited to have that conversation about potential revenue, patients, and fantastic doctors coming to their hospital, even though the current partner of the practice might not be as excited or forthcoming with me about paying the doctors what the market says they're worth.
To me, and of course, I am an example of the ancient past, but to me, the transformation in the way that healthcare economics has come about, especially during the time that I was in practice, it seems to me that what we're working with now is something that literally did not exist 50 years ago when I was actually looking for work myself. And that is, for the most part, in those days, physicians were pretty much their own employers. And I'm finding that is almost totally non-existent now. And I presume that you've taken a good wide look at the landscape of healthcare economics, and I'm wondering if you're seeing the same thing. Is the private practitioner going to be a thing of the past soon, or do you think there will always be a place for them?
That's a fantastic question, Randy. And your experience reflects my observations in terms of private practice becoming less common for experienced physicians and as well as, new physicians. I think what we've seen is what I call a corporatization of medicine, where hospital systems, private equity firms, and businesses are really taking control of what used to be run by physicians. And naturally, when you see business taking over, there's certain procedures that are put in place that try to standardize care, because there's a belief that with standardized care comes economies of scale, efficiencies, cost improvements, etc. But ultimately, what you tend to see now, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well, Randy, what I tend to see now is executives making decisions about care and on behalf of physicians, where physicians seem to be less empowered to make those decisions about the trajectory of the organization. So people like myself, with law degrees, MBAs, are the ones deciding the fate of patients in some cases. And one of the tragedies of healthcare, especially today, is physicians are not in the rooms where decisions are being made. An executive might bring a physician into, hey, Dr. Smith, do you mind weighing in on this, case that happened? But when they talk about organizational growth or market share or procedures that we do at our facilities, you tend to see those decisions increasingly being made by people with backgrounds like myself who are non-clinical, as opposed and think about this. How often do you see doctors as CEOs? I mean, that's incredibly rare. I mean, maybe your experience might be different than mine, but that seems incredibly rare, where physicians are the ones who are making the final decisions for the hospital or on behalf of the health system.
Yeah, it is extraordinarily rare. And the profound change that I have seen is that hospital systems tend to look upon physicians as nothing more than an item of overhead.
Wow.
And that being the case, I think it's important for physicians to understand that reality. When you're going and taking care of patients, you tend to see that as a way to provide your own livelihood. But for the hospital exec, you're actually overhead. And that being the reality, I don't see how that cannot tip the scales toward the hospital execs. So if you want to react to that, what do you think?
I think that is even more profound than you might have intended it, Randy. That hospitals and executives see doctors as overhead, as opposed to the entire reason you're in business. If your doctors say today, hey, we're not doing a lick of work, what even would a hospital be?
Exactly. And that's, the situation is, at least as of now, as I see it, is hardly different at all as to that of nurses. And that is,
there you go.
They are an item on the overhead side of the ledger. So it should be easy, I think, for physicians to understand that in that negotiation realm, unless they've got some kind of experience that I just don't think people run into in the course of medical education, then I think a physician would be extraordinarily unwise to go into that salary negotiation without talking to a professional such as yourself. Would you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. But here's my question though, Randy. I can give you stories of a rheumatologist who had her pay cut by $120,000 for economic reasons. I can tell you about doctors who get laid off because of budgetary considerations. I told you about the orthopedic surgeon whose pay is getting cut in half. Why don't those doctors stand up and say, this is not right? Because each of those situations, they've said, the individual doctor has said to me, well, I'm going to see if I can fix it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the pain tolerance? Is it lack of belief that you actually deserve better? Why don't more doctors stand up and say, like nurses, we need representation at scale for the value that we bring? And part of me wonders if it's the level of pain that nurses might feel relative to their
Mm-hmm.
compensation, and maybe doctors aren't in as tough a position just yet. But what do you think? Why don't more doctors stand up and say, this isn't right?
Well, from my perspective, I think it entirely revolves around the reality that this is a new thing. The business model for physicians in the United States for all of the last century and a good percentage of the current century has been based around physician practice as entirely separate from hospital, except in special situations like the Ochsner Clinic and the Mayo Clinic and so forth and so on. But this new world where community hospitals are rare and becoming rarer, and the employment opportunities come from enormous corporations who are dealing not with just one individual, but many doctors. It changes the entire landscape, and it's something that certainly is not taught about in medical school classroom experience. It's a new world, if I may be trite, and I don't think anybody in medical school or even in residency gets any planned or organized training in such a way as to be prepared for that. And for that reason, I'm inclined to think that your business will spawn many others because otherwise physicians are going to be taken advantage of, not by everybody. Not everybody is out to get them. But on the other hand, every CEO wants the financial statement to look good for them.
There you go.
Am I way off the mark or not?
Man, I could not have said that any better myself, Randy. I think that, and from the perspective of someone who has done this work as a physician, I think that your experience is incredibly valid in terms of enlightening. Well, why? Because from my perspective, it's obvious. If a hospital or employer is incentivized to protect their interest, then I need someone to make sure that I am protecting my interest. But like you said, now that we're in this, and I'm going to use your term, now we're in this new world where physicians are overwhelmingly employees as opposed to owners. I think it does create an imbalance of power that physicians are not prepared to create a level playing field for.
Well, I agree with you absolutely on that. And it makes me feel good. It makes me feel better to know that there are people such as yourself who recognize that and who can provide a really valuable service for physicians. And I know that there are going to be many clients in your life in the future that are really, really, really glad that they've met you because you do provide a very important service. What we're going to do at this point, Ethen, now that you've put up with my incessant questioning, is that I'm going to give you an opportunity to address the audience without my interruption at all. And I am going to close my mic. And Mr. Ethen Nkana is going to give us his personal prescriptions for success.
I learned this the hard way, and I hope that others don't have to do that themselves. So my prescription for success comes in 3 parts. First of all, it's self-reflection, knowing what is important to you. When I work with physicians, one of the first things that we do is we interview the physician to understand what is most important to you in your life and in your practice. When I was a W-2 professional, I had aspirations that were infused upon me. I don't feel as though I was climbing the ladder that I wanted to be on. And so I could have done a better job and should have done a better job of knowing what really is important to me in life. And so my prescription to start, the first of 3, is knowing yourself. 2, you must advocate for yourself. It's incredibly challenging to speak up and say, I deserve, I believe I've earned. And I want to challenge everyone listening that if you don't advocate for yourself, nobody will. If you're waiting for your employer or your hospital or your partner to say, hey, great job, Ethen, we're going to pay you more because you're such a phenomenal part of our organization, don't hold your breath. So it is up to you to have 30 seconds of courage and speak up on behalf of yourself and what's important to you. And then lastly, and this is the hardest part, this is the part where I have to support the overwhelming majority of my doctors, and I have to coach them on the skills, is there may be a time where you need to go to grow. So if you're in a toxic situation, or you're in a situation that you believe doesn't align with your values or your goals or how you want to practice medicine, how long are you willing to allow that to continue? How long are you willing to allow your patients to get not the best of you or to get less than your best? You must be willing to go to grow, and there will be new patients. There will be new staff that love you. There will be people that need you. But if you're stuck in a toxic situation, those people won't ever have the benefit of working with you. So first, you must know yourself, what's important to you. Secondarily, once you know what's important, you've got to stand up and demand what's important to you by advocating for yourself. And then lastly, if where you are isn't willing to provide you with what you need that gets you to the place where you want to be, you may need to go to grow. And those are my 3 components to the recipe for Prescription for Success.
That's a whole lot of wisdom right there for a very young man. And I tell you, I'm really impressed. Know yourself, advocate for yourself, and be ready to make a move. I think that's good advice, not only for physicians, but just about anybody that wants to have a really successful life. Ethen, I have really, really enjoyed having a conversation with you. It's, for an old man like me, it's very encouraging to have a young man such as yourself bring a little brightness into these challenging times that we face as physicians. So I want to thank you for being here. And before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience who you work for, and how they can find you.
I have a horrible boss myself. So my company is called Rocky Mountain Physician Agency, or RMPA for short. And you can find us on our website at www.rmpa.co. That's Robert Mary Paul Adam.co. On our socials, we have a ton of education on our YouTube, which is The Doctor's Agent. We have a plethora of educational resources, strategies that doctors can use. And then lastly, you can always find us on LinkedIn, searching for my first name and last name, Ethen, and last name is N as in November, Kana. I'm here to help. So I want to educate first, Randy, which is why I love conversations like this. So doctors don't ever have to question, well, is Ethen going to try to sell me on something or try to force? I don't work with every doctor. We turn away far more doctors than we work with. And the reason for that is because we work with the doctors who truly believe I've earned better and I deserve better. So if you call me, the only thing I want to do is help. And you can reach me on my cell phone directly at 720-471-0059 by text or phone call.
Mr. Ethen Nkana, thank you very much for a fascinating conversation, and thanks for being on Prescriptions for Success.
It's been a ton of fun, Randy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. If you enjoyed the show, please help us reach more listeners by leaving a rating and a review, especially on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if your app doesn't have that option, just leave us an email or a voicemail through SpeakPipe at www.mymdcoaches.com/podcast. You can also help by becoming a Patreon member. That link is in the show notes. And we also hope you'll follow our companion podcast, Life-Changing Moments with Dr. Dale Waxman. Special thanks to our producer, Craig Clausen, our promotions manager, Mariana Rodabaugh, and to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, Be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.